Previously on Lost. So this was what I presented last time. When does an organization legacy enable or constrain? Some of you may remember this. But I wanted to start by saying, what is the motivation? So there's a curiosity that I have. It seems like legacy has a paradoxical element associated to it. And I observed that from my own practitioner's perspective. I work for an organization that has a rich history and claims to be the inventor of automobiles. It has benefited us greatly when it comes to innovating in certain areas. However, whatever has helped us until now also seems to anchor us down. And with that motivation, I wanted to see what is out there. And this was what I presented last time. I would like to plan my entire research around three pillars, one on innovation typology, and another one on organizational legacy, and then the duality and tension. And from a practitioner's point of view, of course, that curiosity I had mentioned, why something that helped us could hurt? That's number one. And number two is, if I'm a leader of an organization, how do I signal legacy? I seem to use it, but am I using it intelligently? And those are some elements from a practitioner's perspective. And what do I do about the behavior that I curate within the organization? The innovation behavior that I curate, is it only preserving the traditional safe bets, so to speak, versus things that have the ability to disrupt and even throw us out? So that's the motivation from a practitioner's perspective. And as I started this journey, I noticed that what is the motivation for the scholars here? The topic of legacy itself is addressed. It started off with imprinting theory way back when. Of course, innovation is also well studied, different types of innovation, what enables what it doesn't. But very little connections between them. There seems to be deep focus, but not enough links. So the defragmented nature is what is in for a scholar. Another topic, what's in for the scholar, is people say, yes, it benefits some type, but it hurts another type, but nobody talks about the conditions. What are the conditions under which legacy enables? What are the conditions under which legacy acts as a burden? That is missing. And then there's also some conflicting theories. The ambidexterity theory talks about organizations can design itself to gain both, whereas the core rigidities theory say organization inherently is designed to protect what pays its bills now. And in fact, the whole design is to that. So those are the reasons. From a practitioner's perspective, there are benefits. From a scholarly perspective, there are some room there. So I'm an aspiring scholar. I'm about to enter a room. And before I open the door, I hear some discussions happening inside the room. It starts off with identity, and it talks about who we are. Unfortunately, if you go through that literature, it is very static. It doesn't have a continuous temporal nature to it. That's what I'm hearing. And I'm also hearing some kind of a path dependency, saying it's self-reinforcing, so it is going to keep drilling the same path so that the path dependency is there. And I'm also hearing a little bit about imprinting, and original roots of that is from Stinchcombe, and then more recently the legacy from Radu Lefebvre, who also is there in Europe. And what I aim to do is enter this room and start contributing to the discussion that is ongoing. But my focus is going to be more in terms of how does it matter in terms of the salience that legacy brings in for innovation typology and duality. So with this, I have created my first introduction chapter, which I'm calling it as the burden of identity. I want the title to be a little provocative, draw people in. There's a burden of identity. And the question is why organizational legacy enables some versus the other. And if you take the burden of identity, I'm asking three fundamental questions. This is where there's a change from the last time I presented. I had the when organization legacy was my point. And after reading this article that we recently got, the term when is kind of weak. So I wanted to take that away And I'm starting off with what is the relationship as a first step, and from there I go into why. So that's where the conditionality gets established. And then finally, how it influences the organization's capacity. And contributions coming from each of those would be, okay, I can theorize legacy in dimensions. What I mean by that is legacy is something that can be signaled by multiple actors. It could be from the CEO's perspective. It could be from corporate archives. It could be from corporate communications. And also, most importantly, from the product itself. So I want to create those dimensions of legacy being signaled. Legacy exists. People are signaling it. And it is not a single entity that is signaling with a single output. There are multiple players who signal legacy and varying levels of impact that they could have. So with that, I'm trying to establish a common ground, and this is coming from a more personal setting. So back in the 80s or towards the 80s, 90s, Daimler at that time, Daimler-Benz AG, had this chairman, Edzard Reuter, who is like a well-known, later on a politician. In his room, there was a picture, and this is a real thing, it is not a made-up stuff. There was a picture of a dinosaur, and that said, history is full of giants who failed to adapt. And I thought that was a great way to start this entire journey, where it's a reminder that one who doesn't adapt potentially could be irrelevant. And I'm also drawing from this rhetorical ventriloquism, which CEOs and leaders tend to use when they are introspecting. How do I justify my strategic directions now, my imperative that I'm asking the organization to follow now? Who can I talk to? And the strategic or rhetoric ventriloquism is a great way for people to reflect on what would have the founder done. And I see that also in Procter & Gamble, that Procter & Gamble CEOs tend to ask what would have the founder done when they're going through some interesting patches. And of course, that helps me establish a common ground with the reader. They're able to probably relate, even if they're not big into automobiles, they can relate to Nokia, they could relate to Kodak, and so on. So that's the intent of the common ground. And anyone who has visited any kind of a museum, they could also acknowledge that the museum tries to maintain that history, the founder's objective, and through the years, how the product maintains some of those signature elements and how it is also evolving. So that's my starting point to establish a common ground. Right after that, I'm introducing this complexity, and for that, I'm using Abernethy and Clark. It's also an old paper, but this is a really good framework for me to anchor myself and start bringing some real examples from my own personal experience. Different kinds of competency enhancing innovation, things like I'm really good at making cars, I'm going to make a faster car. That would be considered as a competency enhancing innovation. Versus, I'm really good at making car, now I'm going to make it self-driving. And that's like a competency destroying, because now I need to make a car more like a software-based element, for example. And on the other axes, there are existing market linkages, relationships that you have with suppliers, customers, partners, and then things that are completely new. And an example there would be, there needed to be no relationship established with gas station owners when we make a car. However, when we went to electric cars, suddenly how do you recharge a car became very important. So the market linkages also give us an axis. And from traditional experience that we have in large companies, the regular innovations do really well. The term ADAS stands for driver assistance and safety. So in your cars, you have a radar system or a camera system that can alert when you get really close to an obstacle. That will be something that we are very good at, and we continue building on it. And then in completely another area, the architectural type of innovation, traditional organizations struggle. So this is where I'm trying to bring the complication that traditional organizations, legacy organizations, they tend to be very good at this. They really don't know how to do this, but they don't accept it quite yet. Some of them manage to try a little bit here. They try to taste what's out there, but the large organization is so much designed to pull them back into this quadrant that we are never really set up for success in any other quadrants, most importantly, the architectural innovation. Then the concern generally is that the concern that I'm trying to highlight again is that leaders don't have any way of managing this. So leaders tend to focus more on the bottom left quadrant, the regular type of innovation, and we really don't know how to even use this legacy as an advantage. We're just blindly using it sometimes. When we launch some new products, we always make a mention of how we are the inventors of automobiles. In vain, we pull the images of Gottlieb Daimler or Carl Benz and put it alongside, but not necessarily using it to our advantage. And then, of course, some misalignment there, and then the fragmented literature that I had mentioned. Those are some concerns. So I'm coming now to the contribution that I have. Mentioned earlier, I'll start from left to right. Organizational legacy are people who have defined it really well, and my goal is to take the definition of the latest definition that Radu Lafave has, which is a pretty comprehensive one. I really like that, and it seems to be no need to redefine it. I'm going to take that, it resonates well with what I would like to achieve. And that's my, as we learned this morning, that's going to be my anchor plot. I'm going to put that on the ground, and that is how I'm going to start. And then I'm going to start saying, like, well, organization legacy exists, but there are multiple dimensions to it, and these are all the dimensional players: leadership, comms, museums, and product. On top of that, I'm going to start looking into 3 different areas. The Transilience map, that's where you have different kinds of innovation, and I want to start establishing some conditionality. Then you go into competency destroying discontinuities and path dependencies. And that would help me answer the 3 research questions, not only in terms of relationship between legacy and innovation, but the why and how as well. By completing this course of action, what I intend getting out of this would be, of course, 3 contributions. First is theorize the dimensions, map them, and then integrate these findings so that I could have not only the tools the practitioner can use, but also gives a good framework for future studies in this area. I'll pause here before I go into the lit review and where I am on the lit review. Any questions, any thoughts?
This is extremely comprehensive to me. It's a very clear structure of what you want to achieve. Yeah, I understand it.
Yeah, thanks.
I also understand it. I'm very impressed. And the question that comes to mind, and you might address it later, is like, are you contributing to innovation or leadership or strategy or something else?
Okay.
Or legacy.
Or legacy.
Or legacy.
Yeah.
Great, yeah.
I mean, kind of, because you said legacy is your anchor, so as a when you have a legacy going on in a corporation, are you talking about the leadership in these organizations, or the strategy, or are you contributing to innovation? So anyway, this is not clear for me.
And I'm also not sure.
Okay, good.
So I think I was unclear about what to put on the ground and what to look from multiple layers. So this morning we talked about the default.
Yeah.
So I wasn't sure, and then after a little bit of discussion with Omar, it makes sense for me to anchor everything down on legacy and work on the dimensions, because I think that currently does not exist. So I can work on the different dimensions of legacy and their role in terms of innovation.
And then transcends into
yes, exactly.
outcomes.
And even on the innovation side, I want to be limited in what I'm looking at, because innovation is also a huge area, and I'm only picking these 3.
So are you suggesting basically that you have the same type of model as Alexander? So you have input, legacy, you have outcomes, innovation, failure or performance, and what happens in between? We have the literature, but we haven't put it nicely together yet. So we don't see.
I think so, but I'm also not sure. Initially, I was thinking about a theory generation type. There are 4 kinds of lit review, IPO, and then the 4th one was theory generation, I believe. I was tending towards that, but I have a feeling I'm more, this is more applicable for input, process, output, and the process being, how do these players, the dimensions of legacy, how do these play in terms of different types. So they might be IPO, but multiple processes based on which player we are talking about. So I think I'm leaning more towards that.
And a multi-level IPO.
Potentially, yeah.
He's an engineer after all.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a danger sometimes because I want a solution fast. Okay, now I'll go to the lit review section. Very weak. I'm pretty weak in this area because if I put legacy and memory or imprinting, path dependency, either I come back to this main few or it just goes into this huge collection. So this is an area where I'm going to need help. I'll consult and ask for help. But so far, what I've done for the first intro that I've submitted, 8 good papers that I've read and synthesized. Out of them, 6 I consider are primary, and the rest I'm just using it on a surface level and more to reinforce myself, okay, if that is right or wrong. But my objective is to get better at the Scopus topic, because if I use Scopus, I'm kind of cheating. My professors give me good reads, and then those reads give me a few better ones, and I'm trying my best to make the Scopus results come to this small list. So this is an area where I don't know. As a result, my Prisma is a bogus Prisma at this point. And I also don't know how to include things from Clayton Christensen's books and stuff like that. I'm also wondering, there's a lot there in Innovator's Dilemma, and I'm not sure if that would be considered as a gray literature or more of some findings. So I would like to get help from this group and also from professors. Next step, I have Professor Lechner from Rome and Svetlana are my folks, and I meet with them every month. With Lechner, I have had more than Svetlana, and primarily I'm using Lechner to guide me through the framing. Is really, really helpful. And Svetlana, of course, she knows exactly how to write and how to do the coherent. Is it coherent? It's not. And I was very unhappy with the intro until Friday. I couldn't submit it on time. Then Saturday, Sunday, did some work and used the 5C framework, without which I would have been like very, very lost. And now I'm looking for some feedback so I can move on to section 2. And then corporate historians, this was an advice from my professor to start looking into museums, talk to the curators of the museum and what they're doing. And I got access to all of MB's archive. And what I'm noticing is there's a lot of, this is my just personal observation, there's a lot of glorifying past happening, but without any end goal. Why am I glorifying my past? Why do I have pictures of so-and-so? Why do I have links to the family members of Carl Benz? It's not linking. There's a lot of worshipping legacy that is happening. And you look at the alternative, people, I worked with Waymo or Google self-driving team, and I work closely with some of the industry leaders there. They look at something that was done 5-10 years ago as not really worth learning from.
Exactly.
And that's like you come to Daimler, we have cell phone backgrounds, desktop backgrounds that has Gottlieb Daimler wearing a virtual reality headset. We're just trying to desperately hold on to that. So that's what I'm noticing. I've scheduled a visit with Nike historian and Intel historian later. They're all in Portland. It's easy to go talk to. So I will do some work there. And then figure out how to do Prisma well. And this morning I got some feedback. Rolf and Marina gave me some things to look at. Pharma industry was a great idea. Seemed like they have figured out how to manage those. And then future avenues, what is being recommended. I've not yet done good review on all the papers and what those authors are recommending to study. Hopefully that'll be my next set of action. That was it.
Cool.
But you have very clear in mind what you want to do, right? So so that's very helpful, and then just find the right literature to support it. That's basically.
Now that you talk about the archive, and I've been to the museum,
yes.
And of course driven many of these cars over time. The funny thing is they are very good at portraying the cars, nothing else. So what are the processes that led to these cars, and they show a few heroes, and then they show the cars, and that's it. So there's nothing that you can see, at least the normal visitor that pays the entrance ticket will not see any of that. So I hope that you can see behind that, because of course as an employee you might have access. And the other thing is they are one of the car makers that have not been good at going back to old designs. Like Volkswagen has gone back, they've now stopped it, to the Beetle.
The bus, the VW bus.
Yeah, the bus, right? Renault has been great at going back to the R5.
Okay.
BMW has been great at going back to the Mini. And now the new class. Mercedes hasn't done any of that, which is one of those things where you use legacy for innovation.
How does the product continue to carry the legacy?
Yeah.
So that's what.
How can a product carrying legacy also show a way into the future?
Yeah.
None of that.
Yeah, it's super valid. I think when it comes to legacy, in my opinion, that's one of, in the intro I've written, of the 4 players that I've identified: the leaders, corporate communications, archives, and the product itself. In my opinion, the product is the most significant carrier of the legacy. A. Lange & Son watches, for example. I don't know who the CEO is. I've never visited the.
And you don't need to know him, he's not a nice guy.
but the watch continues to live on. The product continues to live on. Same with Hermes, same with Rolex, or any of those. The product carries the legacy more. And I want to make sure that I understand that in this process. So.
Specifically, if you have a general public product, which Mercedes have.
Little challenge there, which is linked to this. If you look at McKinsey has a huge legacy.
Yeah.
But it's not linked to the product of consulting. It's linked to the culture of the company.
Good point. The name, in this case, the brand, maybe?
Yeah, and then that is then linked to the brand.
Reputation.
And reputation.
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah, values perhaps. So,
Value.
So I see legacy, it's a combination of values, but maybe also biases. So the values are maybe the strong part of legacy. We are this or that, and this is what we stand for. But it also kind of creates confirmation bias or whatever type of bias.
It says that we are not something else, which is also dangerous. Then you have to be very consequential of that.
Yeah.
It would be interesting. Oh, sorry, go on.
I was just wondering, similarly to some of the previous conversations, is like what would make this literature review interesting beyond the car industry?
Okay.
And my thought process was like, I mean, you know, when I talk to high-level leaders and I say, you know, what's really important to you in this life, many times I hear, I want to leave a legacy. Many times I hear that. So I think it's an ambition of so many leaders to leave a legacy. Or I want to build this company because I want to leave this legacy. And so I became curious, like, where is the tension in this whole thing? Like, where, if we could just kind of figure out a very simple tension. So I was wondering, like, it would be really interesting for me to have an answer to the question, is it true, I'm just kind of making stuff up, right?
Yeah.
Is it true that if you focus on legacy, it can actually or cannot support you become adaptable? So what does it do to adaptability? So you know, you want to leave a legacy which like spans a long time frame, but if you're not adaptable enough, you're not going to survive, you're not going to thrive. And so I can see it's kind of in there.
But to your point, this person's role, in your case, you said leader, so you spot on. So what is this person's goal? Leave a legacy. And this person, how are they setting up the organization to be adaptable?
So then my piece of feedback is, for me, if it's like, if there's just one piece in there, and everything is organizing around a very simple, if this is true, is this true? If legacy is such a strong trait of this organization, what happens to innovation, and you're just figuring kind of that one
link.
axis, I would be like, I really want to know that because I could apply it to
Perfect.
so many other industries.
In a way, are you saying that this is too many dimensions across too many? You would rather say, okay.
For me, but hey.
No,
you know.
that's helpful because if I'm able to establish that one important thing, what is a leader who wants to leave a legacy to set the organization to be adaptable?
Yeah.
If that is established, there'll be readers that can apply it to outside.
And I'm not saying to leave these out, I'm just
Sure,
kind of
yeah.
trying to look for like what is a very strong organizing
Yeah.
thread that everything else is spinning around.
I like that.
Kind of- yeah.
I like the visual also.
And building upon that, I guess there is a distinction between companies that would serve the general public and companies that don't. So the difference between a car maker, a Heineken, a Philips Consumer Electronics versus ASML. None of us can buy an ASML product. We can all buy a Heineken beer. We can all buy a car. We can all buy these things. And therefore, the processes that link legacy and innovation may be easier, my assumption, for those that have a product that the general public can buy compared to those that don't. And they're certainly going to be different. Because as an ASML, you can't play on a general perception of a product, which none of us have.
That's helpful because if it is not a product-based organization that you can access,
Well,
then
it is, but we can't access it. I know that they are necessary to build something that's in here,
but not
but
necessarily.
I haven't got a contract with ASML.
Got it.
Or SpaceX,
to-
you know, a rocket.
To what extent does
Well,
that
we're in the
matter?
Netherlands, therefore ASML.
Sorry.
No, to what extent does that make us, if I would kind of translate it, have this B2C as B2B, but for a legacy perspective, it shouldn't matter because ASML does have a legacy that is valuable to the B2B customers.
Intel, for
part.
example.
So
The Intel would give me that because although we don't buy an Intel chip, there is some kind of an Intel-equipped computer, or some kind of a.
Well, it used to be 30 years ago, the Intel inside thing as buy this, not that, because it's got Intel inside, but
Those are gone.
we don't see that anymore. But that's why having access to Intel and Nike is great, because they will be a true opposing
extreme,
ends.
yeah.
Anyone can buy Nike shoes, no one can buy Intel stuff.
Yeah.
But on the legacy side, you just remind me, Philips remains a very interesting example. Because when it was still a conglomerate, and it had its laboratory, it was churning out all sorts of interesting stuff. They invented the CD drive, they invented all sorts of stuff. And then the company was broken up, and you see chip making, chip machines making, also, and all stuff, lighting as well. But in the 70s, 80s, the legacy was that it was basically the number of the patents they had was like humongous.
Yeah.
So it was a company out of legacy that was their legacy was to do research, churn out new products, and it became too big because they said, oh, this is interesting. This is a little disc, and you can put all sorts of shit on it. So let's produce it, and then we need to make a machine. And so it became way too big. So they broke up the conglomerate. But with that, I think 2 years ago, the new CEO who sits around the corner here, he killed the laboratory now as well. So, but it is a company that has a legacy of innovation.
Innovation, yeah.
Yes, and this perspective is very interesting to look at management mistakes, right?
Yeah.
And how often the frequency of change in the board or CEO or management, overall leadership team, affect the legacy.
Right, yeah. And if that person is constantly changing and they have different opinions about it, this legacy is not even utilized at that point. It is just a tool that is used incoherently or
Yes,
inconsistently.
on the other hand, the company is not conveying and not stuck in this path.
Yeah.
Legacy and might be flexible.
and
Super helpful. Yeah.
And when, because it's kind of building on also what Koen said, when does the leadership's desire to leave a legacy becomes the company legacy.
Yeah.
Because if now the CEO of Mercedes jumps in, thinks, I want to leave a legacy. But there is already one that you can't deviate
Right.
strictly. So at some point there has to be some kind of followingness in the corporate
Right.
legacy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just another quick thought, because I'm looking at Wim, and I'm thinking if you brought in Philips, I want to bring in Shell. Would you consider looking at legacy as in like negative legacy? You know, these are kind of, you know, there are everything's in it's beautiful, we love it, but the part of Shell legacy is ruining our planet, thank you very
it's
much.
brand sparking, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, like, what happens then? You know, when the legacy is something that
You should be ashamed of.
I am actually looking into it. Some of the articles whose history is in any
Shameful
way.
legacy. Shameful legacy.
Yeah, there is a Arthur Anderson has a thing. Like, how do you not beat that? Is
Yeah.
still there.
but also because of ExxonMobil, I know like ExxonMobil, I think one of the reasons, I mean, they were one of the if I could be wrong in that one though, so correct me, but they were really strong on kind of moving away from oil and then investing heavily in like wind
That
and
was
all
BP.
kinds of
That
That
was
was
alternatives.
BP.
BP also,
That was
yeah.
BP.
They
So probably
focus
because
on
they-
beyond petroleum at some
To
point.
turn the legacy, so like, you know, something's driving the innovation still, but from a very different perspective.
Yeah, nice. For the sustainability of it. It's like, you know.
No, to cover up the shame, to kind of the out of guilt, I
Yeah.
think. A lot of it's out of guilt.
We'll never really truly know their intentions.
Yeah. So anyway, it's just another angle
Thank you.
to
In the
drive
interest of
innovation.
time,
Sorry.
and to allow Wim also to have his.
I don't need that.
Just a concluding. So really good work, Suman. Impressive work. Having said it, I sense that you still need or are looking for this one book, right? That kind of makes the story super clear and super. What I read in your introduction chapter, I read a couple of things. You talk about fragmented literature. That is to say, you touch upon it, you don't really show it. And then right after that, you identify 3 issues in the literature. You say here, enduring legacy sometimes achieve radical innovation, but more often competency enhancing innovation. Then you say, some scholars suggest strong legacy anchors ambidextrous strategies, while others treat those legacies as rigidities. And then you say, no coherent account of the conditional logic that governs when this is all in the frame of 4 or 5 sentences.
Yeah.
But I would say, if you can kind of solve the fragmentation and thereby uncover the common denominator that is at the root of all these issues, then you have a super interesting systematic literature review and a very good. So that's what I would be looking for. And so you have conflicting findings, conflicting perspectives in the literature, and you have the fragmentation. Good defragmented, creating a structure. Could that maybe resolve the issues that seem to be happening?
That's helpful even for me because I keep going back to the same.
Yeah.
Those 3 points come from 4 papers at the most.
Yeah.
It's Abernethy, Clark,
And it's all condensed in a couple of sentences. But I think it deserves more attention in your introduction because it's super interesting. Yeah.
I don't know how to, but I will.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's it.